This is the first in a series of videos about civilizations in the Americas before European contact, what we might call pre-Columbian civilizations. One place we'll look a lot at is Mesoamerica. Mesoamerica is just another term for Central America. And you can see on the map, over the course of about 1,500 years, there are a lot of different cultural groups in Central America, and they overlap, they influence one another. But the one we'll focus on right now is the Maya. The Maya were around from about 250 to 1500 when the Spanish arrived, although their classical age, sort of the height of Maya culture, is from about 250 to 700. The Maya were from this region in southern Mexico called the Yucatan Peninsula. And what makes the Yucatan Peninsula unique is that it's really not an ideal place for civilization building. It's mostly a rainforest. This is an area that receives lots and lots of rainfall. But because of the type of environment they live in and the geology of it, most of their rainfall gets pulled underground into these big sinkholes. And so it seems like sort of a challenging place to build a civilization. But nevertheless, the Maya were able to build a really complex culture here. And they built these city-states. These city-states aren't unlike what we see in Greece or in Mesopotamia. The city-states are independent, but they share common cultures, and often they will trade with one another. They might form political alliances, and often they were locked in states of war. We can tell from some of the Mayan texts that warfare was a pretty common part of their culture. Each of these city-states was ruled usually by a king or sometimes a queen. One we know a lot about is Pakal the Great, who was one of the kings of Palenque, one of the major city-states in Mayan history. But these city-states were really closely interlocked between trade across the Yucatan Peninsula. Some of the more important city-states were Tikal, you can see here with its temples, Palenque, for example. And the Maya had a pretty complex culture. They had different social classes, they had nobility and rulers, and they built these large city-states where the peasants were tied to the ruler for trade and access to goods and food. They were a technologically advanced culture. Just a few examples of their technology. One of them is mathematics and numbers. The Maya created a base 20 system. We think about our system as decimal. It's based on 10. Theirs is based on the number 20. And using that system, they're actually able to come to very high numbers. You can see an example of how they get to some very large numbers. And they were also pretty well informed about astronomy and mathematics. Using their knowledge of numbers and astronomy, they were able to create a really complex calendar. The Maya calendar systems include different numbered days of the week, a 20-day cycle, named days, then a much longer calendar count, what's called the long count calendar, which lasted about 394 years. And using some of these long counts, we're able to get really good records of when the Maya cities and rulers existed because they built these different steles and codices. They had the only independent writing system in the Americas. There was some debate historically about whether the Maya or a previous civilization like the Olmec invented the writing system, but it seems like the Maya were the first and only ones to come up with a written record-keeping system in the Americas before European contact. Here's an example of a Mayan stele. They were read left to right in columns of 2. And this is pretty useful for archaeologists and historians that were able to read some of these records. They also wrote on a type of bark paper, and they made these codices or books that you see sort of like illuminated manuscripts that have images as well as these glyphs. Unfortunately, most of these were destroyed after Spanish contact, but we do have a number of well-recorded ones. For example, the Popol Vuh, which is the Maya creation story. Speaking of, religion played an important part in Maya culture. The They created some, they worshipped some of the gods that would be later worshipped by other people in Mesoamerica, like the Aztec. One of those is Quetzalcoatl, the feathered serpent god. So they were polytheistic people, and religion played a major part, which is why you see so many temples in Maya city-states. And it was also tied to the state. The king often claimed, divine lineage or divine selection. One of the distinctive features of Maya religion and culture was this ball game. We know some about this from archaeology and some from Maya texts, but they played this game that's sort of something between a cross of basketball and rugby. And it served an important religious purpose. Essentially, they had this large rubber ball. It wasn't quite this big as you see in the drawing. Here's a depiction of a modern Maya playing this ball game. But they'd take a large, heavy rubber ball, and teams would run it down a court like this, bouncing it off of their hips or elbows, trying to get it into this hoop. And these ball games were played quite regularly across Mesoamerica. It seems like the Maya probably innovated this. And the winners would often be celebrated religiously. Sometimes the losers were sacrificed ritually. So this ball game had a lot of religious and cultural significance. Around the 700s, the Maya civilization suddenly collapsed. The cities were abandoned and people moved away from the lowlands in the center of the peninsula to the coasts. For a long time, this sort of puzzled historians, but a lot of modern archaeologists have looked at the geological and environmental history of the Yucatan Peninsula, and it seems like mostly this was spurred by a environmental collapse. While there was lots of rainfall and they were able to channel this water into reservoirs and aqueducts, there was a sudden drought around the 700s, maybe caused by an El Nino pattern in the Pacific. And after that drought, it seemed like the Maya moved away from their cities. If the kings can't feed their people aren't going to stay close to those cities. So by the time the Spanish arrive in the 1500s, the Maya cities are already in ruins, and no one really lived there anymore. But the Maya culture and language actually still continues today, and you still see significant populations of Maya people in southern Mexico and in Guatemala.